risks. Okay. Now, what are subsequent events? Okay, again, I'll give you certain examples. And what was a necessity? See, the first thing is understand why you're doing what you're doing. Because the moment that why is clear, everything else becomes really simple. Okay. So what are subsequent events and why are we doing it? The concept of subsequent events is same in all the standards, IFRS, Ind AS, US GAAP, everywhere. Subsequent events is a similar topic and there are no changes. First, what's the need for it? Let's say I go 31st December is the year end in which I'm supposed to do the audit. Let's say this was 23. And then what happened? Let's say my financials got issued on, let's say, 20th of February. Okay. Now, see, there may be a couple of examples. The best way to do this section is through examples. What if there was a debtor who was existing as at the balance sheet date? Let's say X. And X was having significant financial troubles, which we were all aware of. But suddenly, let's say on 15th of February, X filed for bankruptcy. And let's just say yesterday we did the concentration of risk, right? Yesterday, so see, what have we done so far? We've completed the top and the bottom. We've completed the foundational concepts, which is the net worth accounting equation and the concepts of accrual, matching, and going concern. And then we spoke about all the financials. And then we started digging the first layer, which is the P&L account. We have done the discontinued accounting changes, the forex changes. These are the three typical items that we've done in P&L. Yesterday's class, I think we spoke about accounting changes. And then what was the next topic that we did yesterday? I'm still not very well. So what was the next topic that we did? Yeah, notes. We spoke about the notes, right? Now, today we are going to dig a little deeper about now. These are actually disclosure criteria, guys. Okay, this is a typically a disclosure topic, but the reason why we do it here now with the PNL is because there are some amount of these that would affect the PNL. Right, that would affect the PNL. If we have to provide for a particular problem, it has to come into the PNL. That's the reason why we are doing this right now. Okay, so imagine this guy was a person who had a huge concentration of sales from our end. Now let's say 80% of our sales were due to this guy. Now in this case, even though 31st December ended, but the financials have yet not been issued. So the question becomes, are we going to restate? So we had assumed that this guy would be able to somehow pull along. And yes, let's say he owed me 10 million and I have put 5 million as a doubtful debt. Let's just say, uh, not say 5 million is too much for a doubtful debt. Let's say I have put in 2.5 million for doubtful debt. Let's say we had done that provision. And in our books, it was showing at 7.5 million. And now suddenly this guy declared bankruptcy. And I know that out of that 10 million, virtually everything will go out of, we'll not be able to recover anything. So what do you think? Should we go and restate the receivable and we book a loss? That means, do we touch the P&L and book the loss? Because do we do that, guys? Or what do we do? Do we just give a note disclosure? Do we book a loss? What do we do? See, so this is the first example. I want you to keep certain examples in your mind so that you'll be able to understand the spirit of the provision in a better way. So what happened? We had a major customer who was facing financial difficulties, but so far we were of the opinion that he or she would be able to mitigate those problems. Suddenly, before the financials are received or before the financials are issued, that customer declared bankruptcy. Are we going to give a note disclosure? Are we going to restate the financials in the balance sheet in the P&L and book a loss? Yes, guys, I just have one answer till now. I want everybody to participate because if you're not participating, that means you're not thinking. Don't be passive. That's the reason why we're having a live class. Okay? We need to book loss, we need to book a disclosure, or we didn't need to do nothing. Okay, so that's the first example. The next example was, uh, let's assume now disclose, okay? Okay. Okay. The next example is, now that's a very famous example that I keep on giving everybody. So if somebody has heard it in earlier sessions, please pardon me. But I really felt that this example is such a strong example. I think some couple of years back, there was a news that a small child was dragged by a crocodile at Anaheim in Disneyland. And it was such a shocking event. Why? Because there has never been any history of crocodiles in the area, and it was just like an impromptu thing. Nobody was prepared for it, and the child died. Now let's assume that event happened on 30th of December. The family had gone to go for a vacation. The event happened at 30th of December, and now we have no idea. We have just no idea how much we are going to lose. The lawsuit has yet not been filed. Okay, do we need a note disclosure? Don't we need a note disclosure? What are we supposed to do? Do we anticipate the amount of loss and we put it in our books? But it could be anything like 5 million, 50 million, 5, because it's the cost of a lives of a child's life, right? So we don't know. The lawsuit has yet not been filed, Nagesh, okay? We don't know. So the Disney is the second example. Okay? So Disney is the second example. Now, in events like this, the idea is what? The idea is, why are we issuing the financials? We are issuing the financials because we want the users to rely on our financials, take a rational call whether it is a good idea or a bad idea to invest in this business. So we say that there are certain events that happen. So when we say subsequent, it is a term that implies subsequent to the year end date. So there are certain events that happen subsequent to 31st of December, and they might affect the decision making of the users. And hence we cannot keep it to the mercy of the users or the mercy of the companies to decide whether they want to disclose it or not, because 10 to 1, had it been a good news, they would give it, but if it's a bad news, they would not do it. So we are fixing this responsibility via a particular standard which tells the users that if there is a subsequent event, this is how you're going to deal with this. Okay? So, how are you going to deal with this? There are two forms in which the dealing happens. The first thing is, we ask ourselves, did the event happen at the balance sheet date? That means, was it a recognized or a unrecognized or a non-recognized subsequent event? So the main yardstick is, did that event occur after the balance sheet date, but before the financials were issued or available to be issued? What is the difference between issued and available to be issued? Issued is for public limited companies, because we have a, sorry, guys. Because we have a wait, 1 minute. This pen is again acting funny. Okay, so this is public limited companies. In other words, these are issuers. Why? Because when an issuer issues a statement, it's a formal statement that is booked, and we have an issue date for that. But if it's a non-issuer's accounts, the non-issuers generally would not have a particular date saying that I've issued these financial statements. So any day by which the financials are expected to be available to be issued to the users, that date is regarded as the available to be issued date. So we ask ourselves, is the condition existing at the balance sheet date? Okay, so we had two examples, right? I want you to have another example, which is example 3. What is the third example? Let's say 31st of December 2023, and the financials are issued on 20th of February 2024. And somewhere between this time, there was a major fire that broke out in the factory premises. We have a single factory, and probably because of this fire, we might end up just shutting down our entire business. This is the third example. So, three examples. One of our major customers facing financial difficulties, filed for bankruptcy post 31st December. An event happened just before the end of the year, but the lawsuit has not been filed about a child dying in one of my business premises. And I know that the parent is going to come after me, but I have no idea how much would be the loss that I might suffer because there is no precedence of this earlier. And the third, a fire broke out in the factory premises just after the financial statements were closed. But the capacity of that fire was big enough for me to even shut down my business. What do I do to the financials that are just being issued to the users? These are the three examples that we spoke about. Okay. Now, see the first example. So let us first understand what the standard talks to us about. The standard is very clear. The standard says, see, you need to find whether that event which led to that subsequent event did that happen before 31st December or after 31st December. That means the conditions that gave rise to that event were they existing at the balance sheet date? If yes, we will call them a recognized subsequent event. And what do you do with a recognized subsequent event? You have to change your financials. You have to book losses in your P&L and you have to give a note disclosure. The first example that we spoke about, the first example is actually a recognized subsequent event, guys. See, the debtor already existed as at the balance sheet date. He was already showing signs of having some financial difficulties. So the bankruptcy was now just a certainty of what was happening earlier. So the first example that we have falls in the first category and not in the second category. Okay, for all of you who have answered the disclosure. Now, I want you to have another example as a so see, this guy had heavy losses in 2 and 3. That means there was a decreasing trend of profitability, and now this guy filed for bankruptcy. Compared to that, let's assume the same debtor had no financial difficulties till 31st December, and now suddenly in the month of February, this guy had a huge fire in his factory, and he declared bankruptcy. Can you compare the two situations? The idea is, did the conditions exist at the balance sheet date? So, in the first example, this guy was already showing negative trends. We were already aware that this problem might arise, and now there was a certain